From Eyewitness News, this is Newsmakers.
Preparing for the worst, from hurricanes to blizzards and massive thunderstorms that devastate neighborhoods, state emergency management officials are in a constant clash with Mother Nature. It's hurricane season and winter is coming. Is Rhode Island ready? Our guest on the first half of Newsmakers, the director of the Rhode Island Emergency Management Agency, Peter Gaynor. Welcome to Newsmakers. I'm Tim White. Coming up on the second half of the program for a Reporters Roundtable, we'll welcome Ian Donis, political reporter for Rhode Island Public Radio. For now, joining me on the panel, WPRI.com reporter Ted Nesi. Good morning, everybody. Director Gaynor, thank you for joining us on the program.
Thanks for inviting me.
We're 10 years from, it's the 10-year anniversary of Hurricane Katrina, a storm that devastated New Orleans but was felt everywhere. We're well into hurricane season now. It starts in June, ends in November. I could ask this question a number of ways, but I came up with this one. When it comes to major storms directly impacting Rhode Island, what keeps you up at night?
Probably the preparedness, because really preparedness is, of all things that we do as emergency managers, preparedness is the hardest thing to get people to grab onto.
So not your preparedness, but ours, as individuals?
As individuals and businesses, and we have some obligation to be prepared ourselves at the state level. But one of my missions is to make sure that the residents are prepared, and we like to say that you need to be prepared to survive on your own for 72 hours, because you may not be able to see a first responder should we have a major hurricane. So again, a lot is on the residents to be prepared, and again, trying to get that message through, because a lot of people, I think, have a belief that it happens to other people, it doesn't happen here, it'll never happen to me, and I think that's the challenge.
So on the EMA homepage, there's a whole preparedness thing. I was checking it out yesterday. I'll provide a link to that on the Newsmakers page, but I'll give you your elevator pitch here. I mean, you're on a TV show. Why don't you tell people how you'd like them to prepare?
So I would first like to say it only takes, we're in hurricane season, it only takes one hurricane to really ruin our what's left of the summer and early fall. And I think a lot of people, should a hurricane come through and to be unprepared, would probably trade anything to be prepared. So lots of great resources, really easy to do. Make a kit, have a plan that you can use to communicate with your family, and the last and best piece is stay aware of what's going on. So listen to the news, the radio. Have a way to listen to the news and radio if you don't have power. Have a way to charge your telephone if you don't have, power to charge that. So just a lot of practical things, and I bet most people have all those preparedness items in their house somewhere. Where's the can opener? It's in a drawer somewhere. Where's that flashlight? Put it all together, have a discussion with your family, and then do that periodically throughout the entire year.
It's not just hurricanes that you're looking at. I was kind of struck by something. You had a 2-day preparedness conference this week. We're taping this on a Thursday, and that wrapped up yesterday, I think?
It did.
All right. And hurricanes are always front and center, but one thing that stuck out to me is you brought in a keynote speaker on the Waco fertilizer plant explosion.
Frank Patterson. I had heard this presentation in a conference I went to a couple years ago, and it was really amazing. And it's really amazing because you go into these situations thinking you know what's going on, you've seen it before, I can deal with it, and then really at a moment's, it all changes. So Frank, he was the county emergency manager, really not in charge of anything when it comes to emergency management, a coordinator, and he gets to the scene, and the incident commander, who's the local fire chief in this small town, they're all killed, and now he's in charge and he has to manage this major incident. So really a great story about how he did it, where he failed, and I think that's why we bring these speakers in, to make sure that we can learn from those lessons. So we've had other great speakers too. Chris Torianos from the Boston bombing came in to talk about the challenges of organizing for a special event. So
what's the biggest lesson you took from Frank Patterson?
Never say never. It can happen. Really be aware. It's really dangerous to say to yourself that, yeah, we have a plan for this. I've seen this before. I think you get lulled into some comfort zone, and I think when you get into that zone, I think chaos could be just around the corner. So you really have to be on your toes for a lot of these things.
I don't think we have a fertilizer plant around here. I don't know, but are there any places that you have identified that are high priority or high risk for something like that?
So there's many, and it goes across the entire spectrum. So we actually have a critical infrastructure key resource program that's been ongoing, 16 sectors from transportation to maritime to banking. and we're trying to go through all of those, and they all have their different kinds of risks. So, maybe in the Port of Providence, there's some things down there, chemicals, storage facilities that are of concern. Banking industry, maybe there's some cyber things that we're concerned about. So
That's
again,
on your radar screen?
Absolutely. Cybersecurity, the governor just signed her Cybersecurity Commission, which I'm a member of. We're working through the report that's due out at the end of October, the first report, and then the final report at the end of the year. So, yeah, cybersecurity is really the gift that keeps on giving. It's the universal threat that really cuts through across every kind of thing that we do today.
I want to ask you about the early August severe macroburst storm we saw. Stunned a lot of us, the amount of damage, how heavy it was, especially in the West Bay as well as in other parts of the state. Were you surprised by how fierce that storm's impact was?
I was, but again, it is the season for thunderstorms, and I think a lot of people were surprised because that kind of damage usually doesn't start that early in the morning. It usually starts at the end of the day where there's a lot of energy produced by the sun and the environment. That one, they did predict there's going to be thunderstorms in the morning, but it happened so fast, I think it caught many people by surprise. And it really kind of drew a line from Westerly to East Providence, and it affected very minimal communities in Rhode Island. 9 of the 39 communities were affected. Warwick and Cranston really bore the brunt of that. And in some communities, it was quite devastating. I was actually on my way to work that morning and drove through Governor Francis and Gaspee and really was surprised at the level of damage. But again, a half a mile away, I think many people just thought it was a rainstorm. So a pretty challenging one for local officials.
And I've talked to folks in Governor Francis, other parts of Warwick, who felt a little frustrated that maybe they're not getting the attention that they would have if this had been a statewide event, if everyone in the state had been affected, particularly when it comes to federal disaster aid. Where does that stand on the ability to get federal aid for those folks?
So we've actually gone through the process of trying to collect cost estimates from all the communities. So really 9 communities that had data. There's a threshold that the federal government has to make sure that you can make it. We did not make that threshold in any of the 9 counties, and so therefore the majority of the burden is really on local government to really kind of find out how to fund that. I think some of the highest costs for communities were about a little less than $300,000, all the way down to $10,000 or $20,000 for a community that didn't have as much impact as, again, Cranston or Warwick. So it's kind of fit in that gray area where it's not going to rise to the level of federal reimbursement.
So there'd be nothing for the homeowners either?
Well, whether it's a really big disaster or a small disaster, the federal government doesn't give anything for free, and it really falls on your insurance policies first. So a lot of this damage was homeowner insurance, car damage, trees in the houses, and then National Grid really bore the brunt of restoration. So all those kind of things fall into the Public Utilities Commission part of it.
A lot of discussion about sea level rise as a result of climate change. What areas of the Rhode Island coast concern you most, and is it time to stop building along the coast?
I think it's probably time to build smarter along the coast.
Which means what?
Well, I mean, so again, if I go back to Sandy, where I think the most recent devastation came from coastal flooding and surge. Raise those houses off the ground, put them on stilts, and there's a number of projects in Westerly that are doing that. Some federal dollars are down there trying to make that happen. I think we just have to be more thoughtful about it because it is a concern. We have 21 coastal communities, and every community has their challenges. And again, it may have been Westerly for Sandy. It's going to be another community.
But a lot of people get ticked off at what they see as a government subsidy for people who decide to build these big, nice homes on the coast, and then they get wiped out, and the government has to come in and help. Does that need to end?
Again, I think it's so the entire federal disaster, how they respond, especially how they respond with money, is being reviewed nationwide because it costs a lot of money. The disaster relief fund at the federal government is barely has any money left in it, and again, I think the federal government, in cooperation with state and locals, are trying to figure out better ways, smarter ways to reduce money, reduce those things from recurring again. Because you're right, a lot of frustration about, you got federal money, you built the same kind of structure in the same location, and it happens again. I think we're getting smarter about it, but you have to keep the pressure on.
And you guys have a map, right, that shows areas of concern for coastal flooding. And
we have a floodplain map. You can type your address into it, and you can see where you live in accordance with the locale that your house or your business is in, and it will give you all the hazards that you may reside in or are in your neighborhood. And again, it goes back to awareness. Are you in a flood zone? Do you know your evacuation routes? Those kind of things really make you safer. So again, really easy to use. It's on the website, front page. And when you have time, I'd encourage everyone to put your address in there and see where you are.
Tim mentioned that a disaster preparedness conference you just finished up. One thing I thought was interesting, you had the National Weather Service come in to talk about the hurricane of 1938. I assume you didn't just want a fun history lesson. You wanted to take lessons out of that. If the hurricane of 38 hit today, I think a lot of us figure, well, they just didn't have the sophistication we do and we'd be all right now. But what did you take away from that presentation?
So 38 is a really kind of, I think, the storm that we use for worst case. It was a fast-moving storm. Really 8 hours from Hatteras to Providence, and that's a fast mover.
Category 3? Category
3, moving forward speed 60 miles an hour. So back in 38, you're not going to have the level of information that you have today. So you go to bed, you have no idea what's going on, and then you wake up and it's already through. So again, we use that as a model to make sure we, again, best case or worst case plan for those kinds of things. Any track that is generally west of Narragansett Bay, we're concerned of, because that all those winds on the east side drive water and surge up into the coastal communities of Narragansett Bay, and again, it's really just a great history lesson, and it's a great way to make sure that we're prepared again for the worst thing that we've seen in recent history.
If 38 came, if the same hurricane went today, I mean, have we built since then in a way that we wouldn't see the severity of damage then? I mean, I'm sure we'd evacuate more, but would we still, do you think, see the same level of buildings destroyed and such?
I don't think so. We have the Fox Point hurricane barrier built in mid-60s that will protect downtown Providence. But again, no two hurricanes or no two storms will be equal. So we may see damage where we never saw damage before. It may come from a different direction, different intensity, different timing. So again, we try to worst case all those scenarios to make sure that our planning is solid. So again, never say never. We may not have a 38, but we could have something that maybe is a less category that causes more damage. So again, you have to be prepared.
Well, we did have a 38. It was a different storm, and it was a few years ago and involved $75 million. But before the show started, we were talking about how you came into this job, and you reminded me, and I forgot that you actually started in Providence, which I knew, but from the December debacle. And we all kind of remember that, and that was sort of the zenith of what people perceive as something that wasn't very well managed. And I'm curious how different your job is now for the state, leading the EMA here, from when you directed the city in the same position.
A lot of the same challenges. I think emergency management has come a long way since 9/11. Much more professional, much more process-driven. There's national standards that are out there that I would encourage every local and state director to try to meet. And again, at the local level, more hands-on. At the state level, probably less daily hands-on, but bigger problems. So, again, bigger planning problems, special events, cybersecurity. Not planning for just one community, but planning for 39 communities. So again, there's no lack of challenge in this job.
You probably look at the data, so I'm wondering if storms are actually getting worse, or is there more intense, hyped-up coverage of them?
Probably a little bit of both, but it's really a great question, because we've looked at data from the last 10 or 15 years as opposed to the past 50 or 75 years. And when you look back, we're in our 5th federally declared disaster since 2010. So from March 2010 floods to Sandy to Irene to 2 blizzards, it's really stacked up in a short period of time. So you really have to scratch your head about what's really going on. And I'm not a scientist, so I can't really tell you. But again, my job is to be prepared for those things that we've seen before, and be prepared for the things that maybe we haven't seen yet. So again, a challenging job.
We have to go to a break, and we're going to bring in Ian Donis from Rhode Island Public Radio. We're going to talk a lot about the Pawsox. So you might not have an answer to this question, but just popped into my head. The Pawsox want to build a stadium along the river, just on the other side of the hurricane barrier. Is there any concern Is the EMA looking at that stadium proposal in terms of flooding or any impact it might have?
I don't think we've been asked yet. I mean, I think when they get to actually building and zoning and all those things, you know, whether it's local zoning that really kind of takes the first crack at it, I would hope that you know, state officials that are involved in planning have a say in that to make sure that it's built to the, you know, current standards, make sure it's safe, make sure it's viable, make sure it's not subject to repetitive flooding along the river. That would be a mistake. So again, if that discussion comes, we'd be happy to be part of that.
Yeah, and I said the other side of the hurricane barrier, let me be clear, it would be on the inside.
Right,
It won't be on the ocean side.
Not in the bay?
Right, it's not that far out. No. Peter Gaynor, Director of the Rhode Island Emergency Management Agency, thank you very much for joining us on the program, and we will put a link to your site on the Newsmakers page. When we come back, Ian Donis from Rhode Island Public Radio for a Reporters Roundtable. Stay with us. You're watching Newsmakers. Welcome back to Newsmakers. I'm Tim White. To my right, WPRI.com reporter Ted Nesi, and we welcome back for a Reporters Roundtable from Rhode Island Public Radio, Ian Donis. Hello, Ian.
Hey, Tim.
Welcome back to the show. So you recently interviewed House Speaker Nicholas Mattiello about the Pawtucket Red Sox Stadium proposal, and it sounds like his tune has changed a little bit about the timing of it and maybe bringing something before lawmakers.
That's right, Tim. Speaker Mattiello said it's more likely that lawmakers will not consider a deal for a Pawsox Stadium until the formal session begins in 2016. That's different from what we've heard all along, where the Pawsox seem very interested in moving the deal quickly. It looks like there's going to be a more dispassionate look at the proposal, which is very much in line with what the Raimondo administration wants. I think we don't have to be rocket scientists to realize the administration can put a dollar value on what this deal means for Providence and see if that aligns with what the Pawsox are proposing.
So a slower timeline, it seems like, if they're going to tackle it in January. Is that bad for the Pawsox?
I think it's probably good for the taxpayers of the state because it allows for more time to look at the proposal. Who knows, there are other irons in the fire. There's this proposed life sciences park from Baltimore-based Wexford Science and Technology for part of the 195 land, which is tentative, but something that could be a major development for Providence. So it remains to be seen if there might be other proposals that would come along for the former highway land, and I think it probably will allow for a more thorough vetting of the Pawsox proposal.
A while back, Ted and I had the speaker on this program, and he, in my mind, is probably the biggest cheerleader of the project outside of the Pawsox. Does he see himself that way?
Well, it's interesting, Tim. I used that phrase similar to that in talking with Speaker Mattiello, and he kind of backed away from that a little bit and said, he said he was trying to keep the train on the tracks, which is a very different kind of metaphor.
Yeah, well, is it telling, do you think? I mean, is he concerned that the train is, going to go off the rails?
It's my sense that Speaker Mattiello really wants to see this ballpark happen, but at the same time, and he's confident that a deal will emerge that Rhode Islanders will support, but as we know, for now, there's a lot of public opposition to it.
Ted, Patrick Anderson from the Journal broke the story that Red Sox honcho Larry Lucchino toured an alternative site that was brought up a while back, Victory Place. It's not along the river like they would like to see, but he did go and view it. Is Larry Lucchino being polite here, or is this a serious consideration?
Yeah, I was surprised, maybe even taken aback a little to hear about this, because the evening before I had moderated a forum about the Pawsox land with Pawsox representatives there, and they ruled out Victory Place in no uncertain terms. And then within 24 hours, Larry Lucchino was wandering Victory Place to see if he likes it. We got a statement just this morning as we're taping from Larry Lucchino, and he said, "You asked, we listened. We toured the Victory Place site yesterday, and we want to stay engaged in the listening process." But then he goes on to say, currently, though, we remain focused on a renegotiated agreement for the 195 land. Our goal is a waterfront park. So it
kind of a thumbs down.
Certainly sounds from that. It doesn't sound like he's saying, well, now we're going to look at others. He's saying, we're focusing on there. Granted, even going and acting a little bit positive toward it is a bit of a change in the team. I think has been very focused on saying, no, there aren't other options. There are no other options. There's a riverfront stadium or no minor league baseball in Rhode Island. And so it is an interesting little shift in their public stance to go to Victory Place, to even act like it's worth looking at other places. But I think it's too early to say if there's much to make out of that other than a PR move.
So the forum you moderated, you started with an informal poll. What were the results? What did you ask?
Yeah, it wasn't Joe Fleming poll, so I can't say it was scientific, but that crowd, about 240 people, some of the reporters estimated who were there, it was 80% plus against it, if not higher, I would say, and in some cases pretty raucously, robustly against it as the forum went on. And even some of the people who said they were neutral, when I asked them to raise their hands, it turned out when they asked a question, they were neutral because they might support a stadium with no subsidies at a different site, which is still not really what the Pawsox want when you think of a supporter. So it was, people are just passionately hostile to this, the people who are hostile. And then there's sort of it's an unevenness, I think, because you don't hear that many people, I think you guys would agree, who are aggressively passionate in favor of the proposal. You hear people who maybe are open to it, but it's not like the strong feelings of the people against.
What do you make of that, Ian? He's right. The people that are very vocal against the stadium project. You did a fun story about bumper stickers that are being printed against the stadium. What do you make of it? Why is there such hostility?
Well, I think a lot of the reaction is to the initial proposal from the Pawsox, $120 million over 30 years in subsidies, which struck a lot of people as outrageous. Although 38 studios went south in 2012, that is very fresh in the mind of many Rhode Islanders. They feel like we haven't gotten the answers. As you two guys know, you've done terrific reporting on the issue, and I think that influences the Pawsox debate to a very high degree.
You also wrote an article this week comparing some similarities between the Superman building and the Pawsox. Tell us about it.
Yeah, on the surface, these are very different. The Superman building was built in the 20s for one company. It's a vestige of another era, and it's really in search of a future that does not seem at hand. The property owner paid a lot of money for it, $33 million in 2008 at the height of the market, and that's a big difficulty in trying to reuse the building. The Pawsox proposal is more about the 195 land, something about the future of Providence and the debate over whether a ballpark is the highest and best use of that. As we know, there are many people who see other uses, companies or parks, as a better use for that. So, but both involve the debate over public subsidies and what role government should play in trying to stimulate the economy, whether it should be contributing dollars rather than just adjusting the environment for companies.
Ted, do you think Superman building's hurting the Pawsox and vice versa in any way?
I think the overhang, the hangover that Ian points out from 38 studios, I think is doing damage to anyone who wants to do a project that requires state subsidy. 38 studios fundamentally changed, I think, people's feeling. Not only, it's not that people loved corporate subsidies around before, but I feel like the hostility and skepticism is so much higher. I mean, I wonder,
put it on the radar screen.
Yeah, I mean, I wonder, would the Providence Place Mall deal get done in this environment? Would G-Tech building have gotten done? The Fidelity deal from the 1990s, Link Allman administration. I mean, those involve public dollars, underwriting, and I just think people are looking at it differently, rightly or wrongly. I mean, I'm not saying that it's bad. Maybe those should have been reviewed differently, but I just think you're really in a different public environment, and I think the Pawsox in particular, it doesn't appear they fully understood that when they first announced their idea and rolled out that initial proposal. It just seemed they were the late Jim Skeffington seemed physically taken aback by the hostility of the reaction.
And then he had to come out and do a tour and try to... Do you think that was the case with they aimed high, knowing they would never get it, but in a way it backfired in a PR perspective?
That's certainly a possibility. At the same time, they to this day say, we just looked around at what people get for other minor league stadiums, and this seemed in line with it. So I think they may have felt like people throw money at stadiums all the time, and this is the amount we want, and they were like, oh, Rhode Islanders feel quite differently about that.
All right, Ian, so back to your interview with the speaker. What did he say, if anything, about Governor Gina Raimondo's toll proposal?
He was fairly opaque on that, Tim. He did not rule out the possibility of a fall session, which I think we've been expecting, but he did not describe it as a certainty either. He said it's not clear whether there is going to be an agreement between the House and the administration on a toll proposal. We know this is a key priority for Governor Raimondo. I think the administration was frustrated that the House did did not sign off on this before the General Assembly adjourned in June. And so we have to wait and watch where it goes from here.
And there was some tension between the two chambers as a result of how that ended. Is that playing at all? Is that a factor at all in the different timeline to tackle? Now he's not doing the fall session. Do you think that's, the Senate president was clear, I'm not coming back.
Right. Well, as you say, I think there is some lingering hangover or tension from that, with Senate President Pavel Weed saying they are not going to hold a fall session, and it's not really clear where the toll issue goes from here.
One other thing on the Pawsox that is important for people to remember too is the subsidy issue, which we're all waiting for this revised deal that we keep being told is getting done. That's just one piece of what the Pawsox need to figure out. I mean, they said at the forum the other night they don't have a deal with Brown University yet to take the building and land that Brown owns where Left Field would go. Brown clearly wants some money for that, so how much of the Pawsox want to put in there? You have the issue of getting federal highway approval to shift the park that's supposed to be where the stadium is.
Or definition of a park.
Or the definition of a park. There's stormwater questions that was an important part of figuring out where the water goes from the buildings around there. And that then, I think, feeds into the politics, because for Governor Raimondo and others, why do you want to step out front on this if it's not even clear they have their other ducks in a row to get the stadium built?
And Tim, we also have to wonder if there's any horse trading going on in linking the toll issue with the Pawsox Stadium, because there is gambling in the Casbah and horse trading at the State House.
Our thanks to our first half guest, Peter Gaynor from the Rhode Island EMA. If you missed any of it, online, WPRI.com. Ian Donis, Ted Nisi. We'll see you next week on Newsmakers.